Hello. Before we start, if you hear a heavy sound like a whooshing in the background, that's not Niagara Falls, that's actually heavy rain. We've been having heavy rain here in the Niagara area this morning. The resurrection of Jesus, there's no doctrine that is more dangerous to misunderstand than that. And from the very beginning, the Watchtower, among other faiths that are in, shall we say, the realm of heterodoxy when it comes to being compared to the historical faith of the church, the Watchtower has had the wrong doctrine of the resurrection of Christ from the beginning. And if you get the resurrection of Christ wrong, you tend to get the rest of the doctrine of the resurrection of the human race and what it is, the day of judgment, all that stuff is misunderstood very readily if you don't get the resurrection of Christ right. So it's fatal, actually, not just dangerous in the sense of not a good idea and deleterious to your health, but fatal potentially, because the resurrection is one of the tenets of the gospel. It is the gospel that was preached by the early church and has been preached now faithfully by the great denominations of Christendom for 2,000 years. It is at the center of the creeds of the church as well. It's not only doctrine, it is the apologetic of the church. The resurrection of Christ, his physical, bodily resurrection, was the earliest apologetic of the church. Therefore, it is the thing that is the foundation of our faith. Now, James Orr wrote this book, 1908, published in 1908 anyway. The Resurrection of Jesus is still one of the classics. You can get it in free PDF form online, but also you can get reprints of it very readily. This is a book I read back in the 1990s, 1997, I see, and it's blessed me constantly since, because what Orr says here in 1908, we don't have to readjust what he said for modern ears. It is still the foundation of the faith after 115 years now. So there's lots of other good books that have been published since on the resurrection, but this one you can get for free if you're interested. Here's what James Orr has to say. We won't get it all in today, but this is the beginning of his argument starting on page 34. The chapter is Its Nature as Miracle. There is no doubt, affirms Mr. F.C. Burkitt, that the Church of the Apostles believed in the resurrection of their Lord, all which simply re-echoes what the Apostle Paul states of the general belief of the church of his time. And here he quotes 1 Corinthians 15. For I delivered unto you first of all that which also I received, that Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, that he was buried, and that he hath been raised on the third day according to the Scriptures. 1 Corinthians 15, verses 3 and 4. Here then is a conceded point, the belief of the apostolic church in the resurrection of the Lord. It is well to begin with this point and to inquire what the nature of the belief of the earliest church was. Was it belief in visionary or spiritualistic appearances? Belief in the survival of the soul of Jesus? Belief that somehow or somewhere Jesus lived with God while his body saw corruption in the tomb? Or was it belief that Jesus had actually risen in the body from the grave, that he had been truly dead and was as truly alive again? Now, that the belief of the apostles, the first disciples, was really belief in a true physical resurrection, in other words, a resurrection of the body of Jesus from the grave, it seems impossible in face of the evidence to doubt. Take first the narratives and the synoptics, that is, the first three Gospels. There are three of these, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and the cardinal feature in each is the empty tomb and the message to the women, and through them to the disciples, that the Lord had risen. He is not here, he is risen. The body had left the sepulchre. It is not otherwise in St. John. The Magdalene, and after her Peter and John, whom she brings to the spot, find the tomb empty. It is to be remembered that there are several other miracles of resurrection in the Gospels, and these throw light on what was understood by resurrection in the case of the Master. They were all bodily resurrections. The professed fear of the authorities that the disciples might steal away the body of Jesus and say, "He's risen from the dead," points in the same direction. With this belief in the bodily resurrection correspond the narratives of the appearance of the risen one to his disciples. It is not the truth of the narratives that is being discussed at this stage, though indirectly that is involved, but the nature of their testimony to the apostolic belief, and on this point their witness can leave little doubt upon the mind. The appearance to the women, to the apostles, to the 2 disciples on the road to Emmaus, to the disciples in Galilee, all speak to a person who has risen in the body, not to an incorporeal spirit or phantom. The conditions of existence of the body were, indeed, in some respects, supernaturally altered, as befitted the new state on which it had entered, and was yet more fully to enter. But it was still a body which could be seen, touched, handled, which evinced its identity with the body that had been crucified by the print of the nails and the spear marks in the side. These marks of his passion, it is implied, Jesus bears with him even in the body of his glory. Now there's a thought that's new to us if we're ex-witnesses. He still has those marks, albeit his body is glorified. And he will return with this same body. And if you need evidence of that, check out Zechariah chapter 12, specifically verses 9 and 10, where we see that they will recognize the one whom they pierced, Zechariah prophesies. They will look on him whom they pierced. By the way, in many of the texts of that Hebrew passage, it is Yahweh himself speaking. They will look on me whom they pierced. He walked with his disciples. He conversed with them. He ate with them. He showed himself alive, as Luke says, after his passion by many proofs. If any tangible evidence could be afforded of the real resurrection of the Lord from the grave, it was surely furnished in that wonderful period of intercourse with his disciples prior to the final ascension to his Father. And of course, Acts records that he ascended bodily too, visible to their sight. A passage that's been much perverted by the Watchtower, who make more of the cloud into which he disappeared than they do of the fact that he ascended in the body. So this is the belief of the church now for 2,000 years. It's embodied in the creeds. Orr defends it in 1908. There's much more to come, by the way, in this book. So this is the first of many installments, I hope, from James Orr's work. I'll put in a link to our meditation on the difference between the gospel of the church, the gospel of the New Testament, the gospel of the apostles, and the gospel or good news of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. Our meditation on 1 Corinthians 15, 1-5. See you soon.